Everybody, thanks so much for listening to Fire Breathing Rob. If you're listening to us for the first time, please like, subscribe, share, get this interview out to as many people as possible. We have a returning guest, a special guest, a guest that everybody loves to hear from. And we're happy to have Darius Ross back on to talk about the incredible issues crushing America today. And unfortunately, there's a lot, but we'll get into some of them. And this is part of a series that, like I said, we're going to keep doing with Darius because he brings the information back to the people. So Darius, first of all, thanks again for coming on, and I'm excited for this.
It is my pleasure. Looking forward to a great interview.
You know, there's Americans right now that are really struggling with the system, whether it's grocery store inflation, gasoline prices, rent, bills, health insurance, the list goes on and on. Um, there's millions of Americans that are scrambling right now to, figure out this system and how to get around it. So, how do you feel like Americans can be more independent of the system as it just keeps collapsing around us? And I mean the system of capitalism.
Today is a good example when you look at the unemployment numbers. This
Right.
thing that's called the Great Resignation. People are able to make more money right now being independent contractors, and if you want to call it, in their own businesses, with everything from Fiverr to the various apps, DoorDash and so forth, than they are able to make in corporate America. They're forsaking the concept of calling the healthcare system, right? They don't need the healthcare. They're saying, okay, we'll deal with the healthcare later on, which means that we're going to have a huge problem in the healthcare industry as far as people having insurance. But one of the big things of it is, if I can make $1,000 a week versus as a gig person versus having to do an employee and having to be a boss and be bossed and be, do a lot of aggravation, people are going for that more so than anything else. So what you're beginning to see is it's heightened level of entrepreneurialism, or you call it hyper entrepreneurialism, because now there's no need to go into the office. One of the greatest things that happened was, when I think back about 30, 40 years ago, being an entrepreneur was a big thing. It was like, oh my God, you're going to be, without a job, without an employer. Now, the millennials or the Zers and so forth, and even some of the boomers are saying, screw the employer. I'd rather be unemployed and do my own gig versus being at a company.
So how is this going to change society?
You're going to be looking at the greatest depression of American and or world history. Because, for example, right now, the numbers are at least, at minimum, 14, 15 million people plus unemployed on the average in 2 or 3 states. So when we look at the United States as a general, we're looking at 100 million people that are unemployed. Illinois has the second highest or third highest rate of unemployment anywhere. Now, Illinois only has 12 million, maybe 14 million people. 16% of that's unemployed as of today. 16% now of the state's unemployed. So how is it going to affect the country? Big time. Nobody's paying taxes.
Obviously, the older Americans are retiring or they're passing away. People aren't working, which means, as you stated, Darius, people aren't paying taxes. People aren't paying into Medicare, Social Security, and all these social programs. And obviously, the government always tries to cut these programs as much as they can. They think they get a kick out of it, which is a disgrace to our country and the society in general. So what's going to happen with all that information that I just stated with these programs?
You're looking at Social Security that will probably by 20, maybe 30, will be in one of its most dire extremes. 70 million people plus will be depending on Social Security. So that's going to be a complete nightmare. You're going to be looking at governmental services as far as Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, post office, police, fire, so forth, gone. Because you can't have people that won't work. They just won't work. I mean, and even in the mixture of people that are actually support staff, or those that are supposed to be part of essential services, they're not taking the PP as far as the prescriptions for any type of COVID. They don't even want to take that in a lot of cases. So that's down to maybe 70, 80% in some cases. So they're not taking any of the vaccines. Major problem.
Darius Ross here on Fire Breathing Rob. I go back to, and this was before I was born, but when Ronald Reagan got into office, in the 80s, all the deregulation that went from Reagan to Bush to Clinton to George W. Bush, and, obviously till Biden now. But, those presidents really pushed that deregulation hard. With that said, we saw all these jobs go overseas, all these factory jobs, good paying jobs, middle class jobs. People were getting paid good wage, had the vacation, had the health care. Majority of those jobs gone right now. So what type of society are we going to be living in then? Because you're saying 2030, all these people depending on Social Security, the millennials aren't paying into it. Obviously, the people that are retired aren't paying into it. Oh, I mean, homelessness is already a huge problem. So what type of society are we going to be looking into then in 2030 then?
We could be looking, potentially speaking, at the same type of situation that happened in the Nazi Germany era of post, if you want to call it, Kaiser Wilhelm, and the concepts of what were going on that created the Hitler regime, literally. Because America is now, and I hate to use that comparisons, but it's an interesting comparisons. You have a situation where unemployment, joblessness, and unemployment and joblessness is two different things. Part of the unemployment is based upon the fact of what happened with COVID, but the joblessness is based upon the fact people just don't want to work these jobs because of dissatisfaction, because of lack of family structuring. For the kids, they don't have medical insurance. They're not getting the proper wages. They can't pay the bills. So two different separate situations. So we have a situation that can create the kinds of problems as far as homelessness and unrest, civil unrest. The violence has gone up. You have a potential nightmare. You're looking at the precept of a Great Depression, of one we've never seen before.
So we've talked on this program before about the rise of Trump. Personally, I believe the rise of Trump was 30 years in the making. Again, we go through that list of presidents in the past, all those jobs going overseas. President Trump did talk about NAFTA and how bad it was. And he had Hillary hook, line, and sinker on that because that was her husband that started that and pushed it through, along with the other deregulation issues in the Clinton administration. Media companies also was a deregulation pushed through the Clinton administration. Banking regulations were crushed in the Clinton administration. So he had many talking points to go after Hillary with. We saw, obviously, through the Trump administration, there's, people that are really worried about, as they are now, jobs, making good wages, rather, healthcare in general. And we saw January 6th that I believe this is the rise of fascism in this country now. And it's not to blame on Donald J. Trump. Again, it's to blame on the past 30 years before Donald J. Trump became president. With that said, do you see that rise of fascism, authoritarianism in this country? Because Joe Biden has done a horrific job as president of the United States, did not pass what the people wanted. He lied to the American people and said that he was going to be like the next FDR and pass all these, rules and regulations to help people, working people, to help more unions be formed. And he hasn't done enough of that. And he goes back to the Obama game of blaming the Republicans, saying that the Republicans don't want to do anything, say the racism and all this stuff. People want results.
Something that's going to be very interesting. There's probably going to be people that are going to probably take offense to what I'm saying, but this is very clear. The recipe is in place literally for, and God forbid, the scenario, but I would hate to have President Biden's job. As a matter of fact, I hate to have Kamala's job because you're going behind such a nightmare. Because when we go back in history, when Nixon took the country off the gold standards, key problem, because now you can print money on a fractional basis. You can go for what you know, okay? Along comes President Reagan, and it gets worse, okay? Because you start creating the trickle-down theory. Then we get President Clinton in, and all of a sudden now you're financing the Asian community. Everything that was in East Asia and so forth, the United States was actually financing a lot of those programs, which built China up to what it is now, which is no offense against the Chinese, but it created a superpower because we need the Chinese goods. So we're providing credit through the UN and so forth in the World Bank. But now let's fast forward. Now you have a situation, potentially speaking, that can be completely off the chain because let's assume that Kamala loses. This would be an interesting scenario. Americans are at a point in time now that they would elect anybody, and I stress anybody, which is the same thing that happened in Germany in 1938. Anybody went in, and the outcome was just as bad. So the problem we have here now is, what will anybody do under the circumstance? What will their policies be? What won't their policies be? So people were complaining about the Patriot Act and the Freedom Act and so forth. I think down the road, there's going to be some things much worse than that when you look at restrictions, and people will definitely have issues.
China's laughing at us. Russia's laughing at us. We need to work with these countries on climate change. We need to work with both countries on climate change, but with Russia, we need to work with them on the Iran deal. We don't really have strong leadership, whether it's Joe Biden or the Republican Party. So is there anything that's going to be getting done as far as climate change, defense issues, the Iran deal in the next 4 years?
No.
All right, we'll leave it at that.
No. This year is going to be concentrated on getting reelected. The following year is going to be concentration on getting reelected.
Yeah.
That's it. No. Foreign policy is out the window. Anything that relates to climate change, out the window. Domestic policy, out the window.
Yeah.
It's just going to be concentrating on elections and fundraising.
So let's ask you this question again. You said that you still believe Kamala Harris is going to be the next president of the United States. With the 28% approval rating, Joe Biden's hovering at 41. Is that still your take?
Kamala will be the next president, and it's going to be based upon low turnout. Listen to what I said now.
Okay.
Low turnout and frustration. That's going to be the key.
Who is going to run against Kamala Harris then?
Won't make a difference.
Not even Donald J. Trump.
No. See, the problem with the Republicans right now are going to have to, and I can speak of this from a Republican standpoint.
Yeah.
We're going to have to be looking at that office when everything is in its utmost crisis. So right now, you're going to need this Great Depression I keep talking about to happen over the next year or two, and for that to play itself out probably to 2030. That'll be right for a time for the right Republican candidate to come along. Right now, that candidate, if I'm suspecting right, is in the making. And I'm going to go on a long shot and say that that's George Prescott.
Yeah, you said that before.
He's in grooming. He's in grooming. Trust me. That's going to be the next president, 2030. Mm-hmm. People should look for that. That'll be the dark horse coming into the program there.
So
and this time, they're going to do something very interesting. This time, the Republican Party will position itself to be in that office, I can guarantee you, from 2030 to at least 2040. They'll have at least a good decade.
What kind of Republican will this be, though? What will this be? The Marjorie Taylor Greene, Donald Trump type? Will this be the George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush type? Who will this be like? Will this be somebody like Teddy Roosevelt or
far right, very extreme? I would venture to say that we might find ourselves again in a military conflict, and in all likelihood, there will probably be a lot of economic gains made. You can probably look at the stock market going anywhere from between 50 and 100,000 points, because once we get past this time period where the Democrats will actually push itself into a depression, you will begin to see this come out, and the Republicans will be able to maintain that control based upon war, economics, and political savviness of hardcore right. We're going to go from complete left to hardcore right. Even some Democrats are going to go far right.
What do you mean hardcore right, though? Are we talking about like more right than Trump?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's scary.
Because people are going to want to embrace it. You've embraced the left. Nothing got done. You got in the middle. Nothing got done. Well, let's try a new policy. And if people's pocketbooks are beginning to fill up again, their stomachs are beginning to fill, they have a place to stay, they have jobs, and the market is booming for them, and the only downside is war, they'll work with it.
So you don't feel like the Democrats will become smart and say, this Bernie Sanders small dollar donation works. We've saw this many times. And if you put a real progressive candidate, they will beat the right-wing candidate, 9 times out of 10.
See, here's the problem with that. The question of the hour is America ready for the truth? Let's just be honest for a while. America probably would have elected Hillary Clinton as president, but America was not ready to face a woman as president.
What if Jeb ran against Hillary? I think Hillary would have won that. You don't agree?
I don't know. That may have been a toss-up. That might have been a real tight race, very tight race. But she had the possibilities of taking that one. But America wasn't ready for a female president because even some females that felt as though, this was the right thing to do, their husbands swayed them to say, nope, we ain't doing it. So that was a major thing. But again, the question of the hour becomes, America's not ready to turn around and do what's right for the country, to put the country on the right path. Sometimes it's like that statement Jack Nicholson said in the movie, they can't handle the truth. That's a fact.
Okay, then why was the Obama election then? Obviously, there was the depression of 2008. So if you're saying that there's going to be another depression, why not run? And I honestly don't know. I went through this with many people who it could be. I don't think, I like Elizabeth Warren. I don't think she's the candidate as far as a progressive to win. I think she probably would do about the same, maybe even a little worse than Hillary, because, she might probably do about the same. But I don't know what candidate that's a progressive that could go in there right now, as far as that goes. But if there could be a candidate out there that's a progressive that would run against Kamala Harris and hard, and if that he or she beat Harris, I think that the country's ready. I think the country was ready for Bernie Sanders, but they cheated him again out of that. We saw that, in many different states. But the country was ready to vote for Bernie Sanders in 2016. So, that's why we differ, I guess. I just believe that if you have the right candidate, Bernie Sanders was an old Jewish guy. He was a grumpy guy, but he told it like it is. People are yearning for that, I feel like. That's why they voted for Trump. Even though he was a bullshit artist, he was telling it like it is. And people are yearning for that. They're yearning for the truth. They don't like Harris because they feel like she's like Hillary Clinton. They liked Biden because he wasn't Donald Trump. And he even got a little of those votes that, he tells it like it is. And he's like Union Joe. Now, like I said, for re-election, if he does run, and Harris can't get those votes, tells it like it is.
No.
I mean, she's not going to get those votes. Let's be realistic.
No.
So that's why I think we're different. Like, I agree. I think that there is a time for a person like Bernie Sanders or a progressive, but it's got to be the right progressive, man or woman. I don't think it matters, but it has to be a strong person that is going to fight the establishment. And Bernie fought Hillary Clinton, but he didn't fight her hard enough. When he went against Joe Biden, he didn't fight Joe, period. And that's why he had, along with the coronavirus.
See, the problem you have right now is that you have a situation that the candidate that I think that actually will be the ideal Democratic candidate hasn't been born yet. Because what we need is a candidate that has the charisma of John Kennedy, the financial backing of a Michael Bloomberg, the wherewithal when it comes to charisma of Barack Obama and the connections there, and then last but not least, the good looks. And then you throw in the recipe where he can be a good orientator or she can be a good orientator, and you have the perfect candidate. But that's a candidate that has to be grown into that office.
We're going to have to continue this because I actually have something at 5, but I do want to do this. So maybe we can do this within the next couple of days and finish it off because I had a lot of economic questions. But before we hang up, I just want to ask you this one thing. AOC, I felt like might have been able to be that candidate down the road. I think she turned into woke politics way too hard, and I think she might have ruined her shot. Where if she didn't turn into the woke politics and do all these glamour shots and stuff like that, like the tax the rich thing in New York City, I think she might have been able to run against Schumer, beat him, and be a U.S. senator, sit over there for 6 or 7 years, like Obama. Obama sat there for less, but sit over there for 6 or 7 years, groom up, and then run for president. Do you agree with that? You think she missed her shot, or do you think she still
Absolutely.
has a shot?
Absolutely, because here's the thing about politics and looking at the White House. You have to look at the White House like you're a sharpshooter. You have to sit out there and take the time out to look at all the terrain, study everybody, study the strategy, study the format, the special interest and everything else, and then make your play. She rolled in and offended everybody. You can't roll into Washington and offend everybody. You know, it just doesn't work that way. I worked in government relations back in the day, and you can't do it. You got to be very strategic, because Washington is sharpshooter. You got to be specific about what you want, how you want it, and know that before you get in there, you can't offend anybody, because you're going to need everybody to be on the team.
So you think her time is pretty much done, then? It's going to be Congress and that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, terrible.
You can't do that. You know, bad business.
Bad, you know. I think she had a good shot to maybe do something, and she ruined it because she wanted to be the limelighter. It's terrible.
Sometimes you have to keep your mouth shut. It's real simple.
Yeah, no, I hear you. All right. Hey, Darius Ross, thanks so much for coming on. I greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure.